Here's the weird thing about Brandon Staley. He doesn't run our scheme. He's a Fangio disciple through and through. I mean, that's just he has been with Fangio through the majority of his career. So let's go through Brandon Staley. Let's talk about how he got to where he is. And like Kyle Shanahan is the number one nepotism coach in the NFL now that Belichick's been fired, right? Like Belichick's hiring his cat and dog to do stuff, any of his family members, and that's his prerogative. He had the power to do so. Shanahan, very similar. He's only hiring people he knows or his dad knows. Any player that played with him at a previous place, he's bringing with him. That's just who Shanahan is. It's who he is. Now, you look at Brandon Staley, he's the exact opposite. This is somebody that is the definition of like a bootstrap type coach that worked his way from the bottom to the top. He did everything on his own. Everything. Started off in 2006 as a GA for 3 years at Northern Illinois. Then he goes to St. Thomas, Minnesota, which is a D3 college. It was a defensive line coach. Then he goes to Hutchinson, Kansas, assistant head coach DC. And so he was there for, DC. So he's called defenses before. Then he goes to University of Tennessee as a GA. Like this dude had to fight his way up. I love that, man. I absolutely love that. Sorensen different because he was a top tier player that played in the league for almost a decade. So that's going to change. He has the connections. You can't say that about Brandon Staley. This dude started coaching at 24 years old. Then he goes to a D3 school, John Carroll of Ohio, defensive coordinator. Then James Madison, defensive coordinator. Then back to John Carroll, defensive coordinator for 2 years. Like this dude, he worked through D3 as a GA, DC, calling all that stuff, whatever else. Then he makes his move to the NFL. And that's after 11 years of GAing and working at D3 schools. He joins the Chicago Bears as an outside linebacker coach for 2 years under Vic Fangio, which I freaking love. And listen to this. Let me open this up. This is the 2017 coaching staff. It was under John Fox. They weren't good. They went 5-11. Talking about Brandon Staley now. Vic Fangio was DC. Sean Desai was the quality control, right? He was the Eagles DC that just got fired. Ed Donatel, Chris Modkins, Dave Ragone. I mean, there are some. Ryan Pace was the GM. Like, he's worked with some guys there. And even the next year, they pretty much, keep a lot of the guys there. They bring in Brad Childress. Like, he's worked with some guys, Chris Tabor. Like, those are some coaching names that he was with at Chicago. Then Vic Fangio goes to the Denver Broncos as the head coach, right? And he brings Brandon Staley with him. Listen to these names. Rick Scangrello was the OC. That didn't last long. Ed Donatel, the DC. Renardo Hill. Chris Modkins. Mike Munchak. I freaking love that, man. Like, this guy has spent some time with some coaches. Then he goes to the Los Angeles Rams for that 2020 season. And guess who the OC was? Yeah. The OC was Kevin O'Connell, who's the head coach and play caller for the Minnesota Vikings. DC was Brandon Staley. They went at it every freaking day in practice. I love that. Joe Barry was on that staff. Liam Cohen. Giro Evero was the safeties coach. Like, there are Shane Waldron. Like, there are some guys that he has coached with and against that I love. Did it work out for him as head coach? No, it didn't. Even though he had a great quarterback or whatever else, just didn't work. Some people are supposed to be coordinators. And this is the second failed Chargers head coach that we have as assistant head coach, and I love it. I like the Anthony Lynn play. You remember, Mike McDaniel gets taken away. Shanahan's right-hand man for like 10 years. And Shanahan buttresses that support by bringing in Anthony Lynn. A lot of that had to do with Bobby Turner, the running backs coach, taking a year off as well. But whatever. Shanahan did what he needed to do to help himself, bringing in an experienced offensive guy. Well, now Anthony Lynn's gone. Now you bring in an experienced guy to help out your young DC. That's awesome. And on top of that, the gravy or the cherry, whatever you want to call it from the South, I'm going gravy. To top it off, you get to keep Bullocks, who would have been a great DC hire. So now you're dealing with, you're getting Sorensen. Awesome. We don't know. Could be great. Could be terrible. But you've got somebody there to support him that's been not only a head coach, but a DC. How many years has he been a DC? One, two, three, four, five, six, 7 years. 7 years. Brandon Staley's been a defensive coordinator. Six of them were at the college level, but still, you call a defense, that changes. It just changes everything. And so I think that's huge. And then you've got Bullocks there as well, that's going to be coaching the DBs alongside Sorensen, which is interesting because Bullocks was in charge. He was the main position coach over Sorensen. Now Sorensen goes above. So I these guys have worked together for a few years, but that's interesting to me. Yeah, I like it. Bobo says, where did he go wrong in LA? That was a great team. Yeah, you know, you talk injuries. That was an issue. They couldn't get the defense established, and let me look up. I'm looking up their ranks real quick. 2001, they had a top 5 offense. They had the 29th defense. That was their issue in 2021. 2022, they had the 13th ranked offense and 21st defense. Defense was the issue. Offense started to slack. Last year, both were bad. 21st offense, 24th defense. It just, and a lot of it, the division they were in was tough. You had Chiefs, Broncos, Raiders, Chargers, and the Chiefs just dominated everybody. But yeah, I don't know. I don't watch a lot of Chargers stuff, but that's just not his thing. That's just not his thing. Hugo, he says, can things change during training and preseason? I'm not quite sure what you're referencing there, but yeah, things could change for sure. Josh says, not a huge fan of Staley joining the staff, but in Kyle I trust. That's the thing; it's bonus. I wanted somebody with experience, so like you got all of them. You know what I mean? You got the new guy, you got somebody that's been with Shanahan. I like all of that. Um, Gosh, I like this. Aaron says Kyle hit the deadline, but was like any student turning in the assignment at the last moment. There's nobody. There was no competition. There's no competition. Every other team, 31 out of 32 teams had their DC. The 49ers didn't. There was no rush. You knew you were going to stick with the same scheme. So everybody at the combine, you know what you're scouting for. Kusarek's picking his guys. Holland's picking his guys. Bullock's picking his guys. Those scouts have worked with our coaches. They're just gathering data, right? And that's all we're doing right now. Like the 49ers rush team, like I'm diving through every single second of the combine. Not because the combine's more important than film. God knows I'm going through the film too, but because I want all the data. I want all the stories. I want to know why they changed schools. What's their foot, hip. If I'm watching DBs, what do their feet and hips look like? If I'm watching linebackers, are they violent? Do they have wasted steps, false steps? What's it like? Just trying to just aggregate because we've got this list. We put out the 49ers Rush draft book. How many years now? I think 8. I think this will be 9. We've been doing this a minute now. Appreciate y'all. Episode 1080. That's crazy. I'm so thankful. And I'm so happy to be here talking about this. But we got 250 players we're going through, and we'll add to some of that. But I want to know all these things and how they fit with the 49ers. And that's exactly how the coaching staff for the 49ers has been treating this combine. Like, who are 49ers fits? Who fits with us? Who fits our culture? Who fits our play style? Who fits our scheme? Those things weren't going to change. And so the bringing in of Staley, I think it's just extra. And this is if, and I don't like thinking this way, but let's say Sorensen's not cut out for it. He was terrible as a special teams coordinator, but let's say he's not cut out for it. Well, guess what? You got 2 viable options in house that are right there in Bullocks and Brandon Staley. That's simple. And very, very easy. Right here, Big Papa, my man. He says the synergy seems to work, at least on paper. Let's see what it goes like in practice. Yeah, I'm excited. Being in the Bay Area now, of course, I'll be at the training camp practices and all that stuff. Excited about that. But yeah, we've got to see kind of what that looks like because we don't know. We do not know. Nick Sorensen was not on the front burner at all. Everybody was all eyes on Wilkes, and then I'd watch our position coaches. I cannot think of one time that I saw Nick Sorensen out there with anything. But again, he wasn't even a position coach. He was just an extra. We'll see. Shanahan's done this in the past. He did it with Bobby Slowick, kind of exploded up onto the scene. Now he's going to be a head coach next year, probably. Not this upcoming season, but the following. Mike McDaniel kind of shot out of nowhere. Like, this is what Kyle Shanahan does. And maybe, just maybe, we need to give Kyle the respect he deserves at evaluating coaching talent on his staff. Because, damn, the NFL is peppered with Shanahan disciples. That tree, it's taken over the NFL in only 8 years. Now, somebody's sitting there saying, yeah, what about Steve Wilkes? Never worked with Steve Wilkes. And that didn't work. It was oil and water. Didn't work. I love Steve Wilkes. I wish he was still our DC personally. But if you don't work with the head coach, you got to go. You got to go.
The 49ers Rush Podcast.